Wrestling is not meant to be played safe. And on this episode of the Square Circle podcast, with yours truly, Marieshadows, we will be diving into ways New Japan Pro Wrestling can improve and be saved. Because in my last episode called One Sided Partnership, the imbalance in the New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW partnership, I explored why it's a one sided partnership and how it's a one sided partnership. And I am glad that it resonated so well with a lot of fans around the world. And it continues to be watched on youtube.com/Square Circle Podcast, and also to be listened to on Spotify. If you are on Spotify, please go search Square Circle Podcast. That episode is out on all podcasting platforms. And the numbers are great. The comments are great. We had a wonderful conversation over on the YouTube side of things where I had to show my knowledge about a couple of comments, where I had a very good conversation about what's going to happen in the future and other conversations about the video itself. But I am very, very proud that I found one comment where it said, "I'm glad somebody is talking about this." Why are we not talking about the one-sided partnership of AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling and how it's negatively affecting New Japan Pro Wrestling? I want to talk about it because I want New Japan Pro Wrestling to improve. I want all of wrestling to improve. The better the wrestling, the better the outcome for money, opportunity, sponsorships. And wrestlers can feel like they have somewhere to go if they want to try their hand at New Japan Pro Wrestling, try their hand at AEW, try their hand anywhere else to get the experience, to get the reps in. You know, for the crowd that says, "I love all wrestling, I enjoy all wrestling," well, you guys are kind of silent on partnerships and how they look in real time. Because if you enjoyed and like all wrestling, you guys will be joining with me and maybe other people who say that this New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW partnership is one-sided. And here are the facts of why it is one-sided. Sometimes in wrestling and in business, you can't have a yes men. You need to have yes, no, maybe men and women. And you also need to make decisions that may not be popular to people that are not on the inside. Because sometimes decisions can be made and us fans can definitely talk about it and us fans can not like the decision. But if the decision is for the bigger picture of the company, because again, the company has to make money in order to stay afloat and pay everybody that is on the payroll. If the decision is made for the betterment of the company, we will probably see it later on in the future. So on this episode of the Square Circle Podcast, I don't know what I'm going to name it yet, but the general idea is giving ideas and perspectives on how to save New Japan Pro Wrestling, to restore it back to having a good aura where we had good conversations about New Japan Pro Wrestling, where it wasn't such a divide and where we didn't have a lot of fake love in between everything else. So for now, it's how to save New Japan Pro Wrestling, but I might come up with something different. But we will be looking at all the championship titles that New Japan Pro Wrestling has. Keep in mind that I am including both New Japan Pro Wrestling and New Japan Strong titles. So that brings us to a total of 12 championship titles that I will get into, talk about the history, talk about who has this title, and if New Japan Pro Wrestling should keep the title, not keep the title. I'll get into some of the dojo training stuff. We'll talk a little bit about excursion. Do we need excursions? No excursions. If I remember, I will talk about that Hot Topic deal that the Young Bucks secured when the Young Bucks and Kenny was in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Because we got to talk about advertisements. We got to talk about ways that New Japan Pro Wrestling can save itself, make itself a bigger image, and showcase it to the American audience, just in case if the New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW partnership fizzles out. I'll get into a little bit of Wrestle Kingdom and the factions and the tournaments. Like, do we need all this stuff, or do we need less of it? Do we need a balance? And I'm really going to try to make this as balanced as I can. And we'll see where it goes. But first and foremost, a little bit of housekeeping notes before we get into the actual stuff. First of all, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for listening. Please go share this with a friend that wants to just learn more about New Japan Pro Wrestling, because I will be diving into a lot of history and maybe looking at the past into the present and maybe to the future. We can come up with some ideas to save New Japan Pro Wrestling, even with this partnership going on. And we all know it's a one-sided partnership because we could see it in real time, and I will be talking about it. Or when this partnership eventually fizzles out, the same way that it fizzled out between TNA and AEW, these are some ideas that they could implement to make New Japan Pro Wrestling really great, because I really do enjoy New Japan Pro Wrestling. So on the last episode of the Square Circle podcast, I talked about where you can go and support me over at the Locals community website. Well, don't do that, because I am not going to invest my time into Locals. Nothing personal. It's just over the last couple of days, I had an epiphany, and I kept asking myself, why do I run to different platforms in social media to try to build a community when I have a vibrant community over on Twitter, regardless of how you feel about me, and I have a vibrant community over on YouTube, and the two places where I can also live stream to everyone around the world is YouTube and IG Reels. And I don't think I need to add any more social media platforms onto my community building. But when you are a content creator, they tell you that make sure that your brand is everywhere, but you are spreading yourself too thin, and I am spreading myself too thin. So don't worry about Locals. What I would love for you to support me on are just the basics. One being Substack. Substack is an amazing community building opportunity where you get to have your own newsletter. I have my wrestling newsletter on there. The wrestling newsletter is now called Wrestling Roots Hub. Originally, it was called Square Circle Society, but after taking a break and coming back, I felt it was too heavy. So Wrestling Roots Hub is basically us planting our feet and or roots into a fandom that we love, to look at the past and celebrate the past in professional wrestling, to look at the present and see what we're currently doing, and to look to the future through discussions, the lens of being a fan, being a supporter, being an analyst, being a topic discusser, anything like that. That is what the Wrestling Roots Hub is about. It's about celebrating professional wrestling and talking about professional wrestling. And this is the way that we are doing it over there at that community, through podcast episodes, video essays. The tape study series is going to come back as well. I could start a thread. I have a Substack group chat that aligns with the Wrestling Roots Hub. So a Wrestling Roots chat group, if you want to join it. There's already a couple of threads in there. All you have to do is just go to marieshadows.substack.com for a very better environment for the wrestling community that is non-toxic, non-negative. However, we do consider constructive criticism to be an awesome thing, and more people should try being constructive in their criticism. And that's going to be all over there at the Substack Wrestling Roots Hub, marieshadows.substack.com. And for anything else that I do, all of my links will be down in the description below, but I would love to see you over at the Wrestling Roots Hub Wrestling Newsletter over at Substack. So follow me there, support me there. Don't worry about Locals. And again, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Square Circle Podcast, and find me on Spotify and follow me there as well. And now let's jump into the ways that New Japan Pro Wrestling can be saved. So at the beginning of this podcast episode, I said, wrestling is not meant to be played safe. Wrestling is a carny-ass business that has a lot of backstage politics that can make, break, or hurt the business. And we've seen all the ups and downs, the ugly sides, the good sides. But when wrestling is good, it is good. And New Japan Pro Wrestling brings a different aesthetic to what we know as professional wrestling here in America versus what happens in the UK and what happens in Italy and anywhere else there is professional wrestling, down in Mexico. Every single wrestling promotion has a different style, different aesthetic, and New Japan Pro Wrestling is no different. New Japan Pro Wrestling gives you the raw ins and outs of what it looks like to be a professional wrestler, what it looks like to have a camera in front of your face and you're going off the top of your mind when you are cutting promos on your opponent, when you're cutting promos on what happened in the ring, how come you failed as a champion, anything like that. And it's more emotional based, it's more real. However, this can only get interest from fans only but so far. And so in this podcast episode, we're going to be exploring many different ideas. Let's jump right into the championships because there are 12 of them. We have at number 1, the Never Openweight title, which Never, Never, is an acronym, and I'll get into that a little bit later after I say all 12. Number 2, the 6-man Never Openweight Championship titles, which is basically the Trios Championship titles. Number 3, the IWGP Heavyweight Tag Team Championships. Number 4, the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Tag Team Championships. Number 5, the King of Pro Wrestling Championship title, which was originally a trophy, and the original creator of that was Okada. Number 6, the IWGP Global Heavyweight Championship title. Number 7, the NJPW World Television title. Number 8, the IWGP Women's Championship title. Number 9, the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship title. Number 10, the Strong Openweight Championship title. Number 11, the Strong Tag Team Championship titles. And number 12, the Strong Women's title. I think a handful of these titles need to be overhauled or just be taken out completely. The same way that they took out the Intercontinental Championship title that we all want and the IWGP United States Championship title as well. As a reminder, MVP was the first ever IWGP Intercontinental Champion, and I really do think we should bring that championship back. As far as the titles I want out of New Japan Pro Wrestling because it's not needed, it's going to be number 5, the King of Pro Wrestling Championship title that is a gimmick and it is a joke. The Great-O-Khan is going for the championship title again because Yuya Uemura has that championship title. And what they do for this championship title is hold a poll on Twitter about what kind of stipulation should the match have for the championship title. Now, in professional wrestling, there should be fun in these matches. There should be, but it is completely overdone. And I think that something as the King of Pro Wrestling Championship, which was originally a trophy, got turned into a championship title, should be done sparingly, and this may be like a special attraction kind of thing, which I think it should have been left as a trophy. But I do not recognize it as a serious contender in the world of championships and titles. I don't know why Okada was just like, yeah, the King of Pro Wrestling trophy, just to have something for people to fight about. But in my opinion, it is not needed in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And shame on the Great-O-Khan for falling as far as he has because he is super great. He is talented. He knows what he is doing. I love the fact that the Great-O-Khan's character is around being Mongolian. He's probably like half Mongolian, but I don't know. The point of that is his gear. Whenever he's in a tag team with his fellow United Empire members, he changes up his gear to have short pants when he's in a tag team, I believe, and when he's singles wrestling, it's long pants. It's different, it's fresh, it's unique. It lets you know what's happening and why it's happening. But the Great-O-Khan has been fixated on the King of Pro Wrestling Championship that I'm like, dude, you are so much better than this. You are worth more than this championship title that really doesn't mean anything. I think that the next title that New Japan Pro Wrestling should not have anymore is the IWGP Women's Championship title. Now, hear me out. The only reason why I said that they don't need this title anymore is because for the longest, they have not shown any of the Stardom women to have their matches and rivalries at the same time as New Japan is on their tour for Best of the Super Juniors or on any tour. You do not see any Stardom women on the New Japan tours. And I'm not even sure if the IWGP Women's Championship title gets defended over at Stardom. All I hear is about the Stardom ladies going after the Stardom Championship titles, but I barely hear about the IWGP Women's Championship being defended. I think it's going to be defended soon, but my point is that it was great when New Japan Pro Wrestling did the historic crossover of New Japan Pro Wrestling and Stardom. Japan is very traditionalist, where they have men and women. It is clearly separated. It is clearly labeled. I honestly think that the IWGP Women's Championship title was created because fans online was like, where's the women at? Where's the women at? When you can also support Stardom over at their Wrestling Universe streaming service, as well as supporting NJPW World as well on their own subscription. But for the meantime, Japan likes to keep everything separated. That is not a bad thing. Sometimes you do need to keep things separated, and that's okay. But I'm not here to tell Japan what to do with their laws and their ideas. I'm just saying that that's how I think the IWGP Women's Championship title came about. And with the positive responses to the historic crossover of New Japan Pro Wrestling and Stardom, where there was Stardom matches, New Japan Pro Wrestling matches, and mixed tag matches that included both members of the respective companies coming together under one pay-per-view, and it was great. But there has been no follow-up. There hasn't been a second time to try and recreate the magic of the first historic crossover, and I don't really think that we need the IWGP Women's Championship title if it's not going to be defended on a consistent basis and used only when maybe Wrestle Kingdom comes around, if they get booked on Wrestle Kingdom, because sometimes they don't get booked. They're just at Stardom, and it's complicated. It really is. So until there is consistency, I really don't think we need the IWGP Women's Championship title. Stardom seems to be doing just fine with their championship titles. Let's talk a little bit about New Japan Strong. I, for one, love New Japan Strong. It was a weekly show, and I tuned in and I watched. And New Japan Strong was created out of the pandemic because a lot of the wrestlers over here could not travel. And so, thus, New Japan Strong happened. And now we have the New Japan Strong women's title. And I think that that should be put on the back burner until we get an actual women's roster for New Japan Strong. But we can't do that because we no longer have weekly episodes. We have like these monthly or every other month pay-per-views of what used to be a New Japan Strong show. And I don't like the idea of having a revolving door just to have the Women's Strong title there to be just as a prop and a representation versus how the New Japan Strong Openweight Championship title is there and the Strong Tag Team Championship titles are there, and it doesn't feel like there's a revolving door because there is story that happens in the men's roster. I don't see any consistent female storylines when it comes to the Strong Women's title. So until they can get something that's concrete, women wrestlers that are signed exclusively to New Japan Pro Wrestling and show up obligated to be on the New Japan Strong shows, I don't think we need it at this very moment. I do know that we have a current NJPW Strong Women's Champion in Stephanie. I really do not want to mess up her last name. And in no way, shape, or form do I want to see her give it up just because I'm like, maybe the women's strong title shouldn't be out and about currently, but I don't like the idea of showing up on another promotion with the home promotion and showing the title around as like it's a home or it's a platform. Like New Japan Strong should still be around. I don't know why they didn't give the position to Rocky to run New Japan Strong or give it to Fred Rosser, who understands both the New Japan Pro Wrestling Academy and New Japan Strong Weekly. They could have gave it to him to continue the operations. Because again, if you heard my last episode, the guy who was running New Japan Strong on a weekly basis is hired by WWE and is currently a referee in WWE. So I don't know why they didn't give that position to either Fred Rosser or Rocky Romero to continue New Japan Strong. And so that way we can have a home base where it makes sense for the champions to show up at any other promotions out here in the United States to let people know that New Japan Pro Wrestling does have a foothold in the United States. I would just like that the New Japan Strong titles have some exclusivity and an actual home rather than trying to share their home with AEW and go over whenever they please, but end up losing in the process because we know that New Japan stars don't get a W over at AEW when they are wrestling there. So I just want exclusivity, and I want New Japan Strong to have a home that is not AEW, because the moment that you start introducing the crowd to other New Japan Pro Wrestling wrestlers who may or may not be contracted and may be on a handshake deal or maybe not be on a handshake deal, it gets confusing for the viewers at home watching, and they're like, who's this person? Why is this person here? This person's from New Japan Pro Wrestling. And then over time, because they are trained to accept and see all these wrestlers, they're going to think that all these wrestlers are part of the AEW roster. And then when we have our discussions, they're going to be like, AEW is so overcrowded. And then when you finally get below that surface line of AEW so overcrowded, you'll realize that some of them are New Japan stars coming over to AEW to have a mini platform of 5 minutes of fame, and it does nobody any good. It doesn't help anybody. It complicates things. It makes things muddied. And then for people online will be like, oh my God, this is great. It is very disingenuous because they're taught by the amount of people that live within the bubble of like, you have to like everything. If not, we're against you. They tweet out that they're happy watching AEW. They're happy looking at all the chaotic shit that goes on. But if you tell them to break down an episode of AEW Dynamite, they can't do it because there's way too much stuff happening on screen. And this ties back into having too many people appear on a 2-hour show that they have no business appearing on a 2-hour show. And it's like, you have to write the story for your 2-hour show that involves AEW contracted wrestlers. Now, if you're trying to do outside promotion because Forbidden Door is coming up, okay, but you also have to know when to showcase other people and your own people, and also get the chance to mix it together so that way all stories can have some consistency and it is cohesive and you can understand it and it's not all in your face and it's not chaotic. Let's quickly talk about the NJPW World Television title, which is currently held by United Empire member Jeff Cobb. I love Jeff. Jeff should be a world champion by now. He is a tank. He is reliable. He speaks his mind and everything that he says is true, especially his recent comments about the casino battle royale type of thing that will determine the number one contender for the AEW World Heavyweight Championship title, which again, Tony Khan hot-shotted Swerve versus Ospreay because he books for the super fan that fantasy books from an armchair anywhere that they are. and they are selfish with it, and you could tell how selfish this is. But that is neither here nor there. But Jeff Cobb currently holds the NJPW World TV title, and this is strictly for the subscription service of New Japan World, which you should get to support the company if you are truly loving the company and are a fan of the company and a fan of the wrestlers. These matches for the title is 15 minutes, and I like that. I like that there's a different of time limits, because New Japan Pro Wrestling can get a little crazy with their time limits. They could go 45 minutes when a match probably only needs like 25. And sometimes it's a little overdone, and then that's when they start repeating certain type of sets and choreography in their matches. And I'm like, this should have ended like 15 minutes ago. I think that more advertising needs to be done for the NJPW World Television title and its champion, so that way they could get more subscriptions on New Japan World and make people more aware of what's going on, the stories, the characters, the factions, and that way they could make more money in merchandise sale as well. And then also for the American side, to do interviews with credible podcasters that care about the New Japan product and that will shine a light on everything that they do and represent and what it means to them to be champion and television champion, and just give a different perspective for fans to see the New Japan wrestlers with these titles and celebrate them, because it is a big accomplishment when they win these championship titles. So I think that championship title, the NJPW World TV title, should be tweaked in presentation and what it's used for. Because again, I really do like the idea of having 15-minute matches, and to see if the wrestler can be dethroned in 15 minutes or not be dethroned in 15 minutes. The other championship titles, such as the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship title, the IWGP Global Championship title, the IWGP Junior Tag Team Championships, and the IWGP Heavyweight Tag Team Championships, needs better focus, direction, and story, and a vision, both short-term and long-term. These are the main staples of New Japan Pro Wrestling, and when we talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling of present, future, and the past, we will be talking about the IWGP Championship titles. IWGP stands for International Wrestling Grand Prix. So those titles are fine. They just need, again, direction, story, just something behind them. And if we're going to have the IWGP Global Championship title, which is currently held by David Finlay, make that thing global. Let David Finlay travel the world with that, with his War Dogs, and basically let the world know that New Japan Pro Wrestling has a new championship title and make it the best that it can be. Now, we're going to be talking about the Never Championship titles. And this is where we're going to get into a bit of history, because I really do believe that these were created during a time that New Japan was changing, and so was Japan. Japan has different eras in its country. We are currently in the Reiwa era, which that translates to harmony, harmonious, and we'll get into that in a little bit. However, the Never Championship titles, I'm guessing both of them, meaning the open weight, regular singles title, and the 6-man, which is the trios title, they probably came out around at the same time, maybe not, but Never is an acronym. And these titles, or not these titles, or the name itself, came out and debuted on November 19th, 2012. This was during the Heisei era of Japan, which ranged from 1989 until 2019. And then we got a new emperor. And then currently in 2024, that's when the new emperor was like, this is the Reiwa era of Japan. So I bring this up to say that in 2012, the roster for New Japan Pro Wrestling was vastly different. This is before Bullet Club. This is before LIJ. This is before the important members and players of New Japan Pro Wrestling that has like shaped it into what we currently have today. On this 2012 New Japan roster, we had MVP, we had Shelton Benjamin, we had Davey Richards, Low-Key, we had Carl Anderson was there finding his feet, Tama was there, we had the Golden Lovers, which is Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi, Gato and Jado were wrestling, we had Tanahashi, we had Okada, we had Tenkozy, which is Kojima and Tenzan teaming up. We had Shinsuke. We had the formation of Chaos. We had a lot of good people, and we had a lot of hungry wrestlers that wanted to make a name for themselves. And during this time, New Japan Pro Wrestling had to get back up and move forward, and that's what they did. And they came out with the acronym of NEVER, NEVER, and I'm going to tell you what each letter represents, and we'll talk about it. So the N represents new blood. The E represents evolution. The V represents valiant. The E represents eternal. The R represents a radical. Because they had so many different faces on the 2012 New Japan Pro Wrestling roster, this sums up the attitude that was given. Basically, there was no fucks given in 2012. And we want to sort of get that back. Well, I want it back. Also on this roster, we had Finn Balor. We also had Alex Shelley. We had a plethora of really good household names that we celebrate today. But in 2012, they were just getting started. So they wanted to make a name for themselves, have the spotlight on them, carve out their own legacy. And the guys that I mentioned before did carve out their own legacy. And that is why the NEVER championship titles were created. However, the original idea for these NEVER titles was to elevate the young wrestlers. However, if you look through the history of who holds the NEVER Openweight Championship title, which is a singles competitor title, it is mainly the older generation of wrestlers. There might be like one or two or three young wrestlers at that time sprinkled in if you look up the history of who held the championship title. But the idea was to elevate the young wrestlers. And I love the idea of elevating the young wrestlers because that's how they shine. That's how they end up developing character, developing personality, developing a connection with the audience. And I honestly do think that the NEVER titles are beneficial to New Japan Pro Wrestling. But this is how we can change this up. Have the newer wrestlers hold that title belt. Our current champion for the NEVER Openweight Championship title is Shingo Takagi, and I love Shingo Takagi, but he is a 4-time NEVER Openweight champion. If you go down the list of champions who held that championship title, there are others that have a higher title reign count. But because Shingo's our current champion, he's a 4-time NEVER Openweight champion. And as much as I love Shingo, I really do love Shingo. I love watching him wrestle. And one day I hope to get to meet him and interview him, but that's for the future and I'm manifesting it now. However, I do think and believe in my heart that Shingo is way above carrying a NEVER Openweight Championship title. Before, when we were getting out of the pandemic and getting a little bit used to life again, New Japan Pro Wrestling relied on Shingo 24/7, and Shingo is so loyal to New Japan Pro Wrestling that they did give him the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship title. They believed in him and we all celebrated, and I was like, yes, this is amazing. New Japan, what the fuck happened? What happened to Shingo going after championship titles that mean something? Let Shingo go after the IWGP Global Championship title. Let Shingo go after the tag team titles and team up with somebody that's not from LIJ. Because it'd be kind of interesting to see how a dynamic of Shingo and somebody else would fare to carry tag team gold, because the tag team division needs to be shaken up again. Shingo is way more than the never openweight championship title. Now, June 9th at Dominion, it is going to be Shingo Takagi versus Aaron Henare of the United Empire. If you guys have been following me for a while, I am a huge advocate for Aaron Henare. Aaron Henare is the most legit guy you can ever meet and chat with, and I fucking love him. So, June 9th, it is going to be Aaron Henare of the United Empire taking on Shingo Takagi for that never openweight championship title. And as much as I love Shingo, I would love Aaron Henare to get that championship title and become a champion, because he represents being new blood. And hell, this guy bled for New Japan Pro Wrestling during that War Dogs cage match, almost dying and having me freak the fuck out. When Henare came in, he was under Tanahashi's mentorship and he was in Hontai, and they wanted Henare to be something that he's not. He lives and breathes his mana. He lives and breathes his tribe and the Maori people and where he came from and his background and everything like that. But New Japan Pro Wrestling was pushing him to be completely Polynesian without any kind of personality put towards it, just everything that's very stereotypical of being a Polynesian. And even though he is very proud of being Polynesian and everything that goes into making who Aaron Henare is today, it just didn't feel right and he was lost. So the moment he broke away from Hontai and joined the United Empire thanks to Will Ospreay, and then also me reviewing his promo and telling him to keep his head up and reinforcing that he has all the potential in the world and I see all the potential in the world, he basically is evolving into this warrior of a man today. He's also valiant, like he's determined to defy all the odds, and luckily the ancestors are like on his side. Eternal, I'm still trying to figure that out. If someone can throw me a bone as to explain the eternal part in the never thing, please do so. He's also a very good radical. He does what he wants and he defies the odds, and I know I'm putting him over, but I'm trying to plug in the acronym of never into a current day wrestler that really embodies the spirit that was shown in 2012 and why we do need new champions holding these championship belts, especially for like a 6-man never openweight championship title, which is just the trios championship title. I am just so used to calling it the 6-man. So it's a trios championship title, and that also represents the same acronym that I read out to you. And it works and it doesn't work. And the last champions was Okada, Tanahashi, and Ishii. Again, older wrestlers that are holding these titles that are meant to elevate professional wrestlers, the young professional wrestlers. We're having a lot of young lions come in, and they could go for those titles. Those would be good starting points for those titles because you get to learn how to work in a team and maybe do tag team for a little bit before being a singles competitor. Or if you want to be a singles competitor, go after the never open weight because it's an open weight. Anybody can go after these championship titles because it's an open weight. And I do think that professional wrestling needs open weight championship titles just in case if a wrestler does not fit into the current vision, whether that is short-term or long-term when it comes to storytelling. If a wrestler does not fit into the current vision of a story, they have an openweight championship title to defend and elevate not only themselves, but also the championship title. I believe that it's a two-way street for the wrestler to elevate the title and for the title to elevate them, depending on what they do, how they think about their story, how they think about their character. This is why it's so important to write down what your character is, the motivations, how you move, how you talk, how you react to certain things, and not just be, oh, I'm playing me. I'm not playing a character. You're not getting a character. By the way, if you are a wrestler and you're listening to this, please create a character. It does not hurt you. It will protect you because fans are crazy. Why would you want fans to know your real name and anything real about you where you could do half and half? You could do half kayfabe, half real, and let us know a little bit about you and peek behind the curtain. It should not be, I should know your real name. It should be, I should know your character and what you always thought of playing, because professional wrestling is the purest form of theater. I will say it again. Professional wrestling is the purest form of theater, and you are taking on a persona because wrestling is supposed to help bring out the character you always wanted to be, but you can never be because you know society will not allow you to be that person that you truly want to be. So you create a character, you play it out, and characters and stories help everyone across the board to learn lessons, to learn how to get over obstacles, to learn how to defeat bullies, to learn how to stand up for themselves, to get confidence in themselves. Does any of this ring a bell? His name is CM Punk. He was the voice of the voiceless, and he helped many people, including myself, find our voice and be confident and basically tell the truth and basically, be who you are. But I just don't like when wrestlers are like, oh no, I'm not playing a character, I'm playing me. I don't know what a character is, so I'm just gonna play me. If you can't figure out what a character is or come up with a character, then maybe wrestling isn't for you, because wrestling is a lot more than just moves, flips, merch, hey, what's up, fan, and then that's it. Let's talk about factions, and I hope that if you made it this far, thank you for making it this far. I need to ask you guys a question, and I hope I get some feedback from it. So we're talking about factions, and factions, depending on what we're talking about, what area we're talking about, what promotion we're talking about, more factions ended up staying longer than needed or shorter than needed. Sometimes you might just need a faction to help you beat up some people, and that's about it. So my question is, if you follow New Japan Pro Wrestling and you know the factions that I am about to list off, do you think that New Japan Pro Wrestling needs less factions or more factions, or a balance of factions? And also, how many people do you think makes a very good faction? And when I say how many people, I mean, do you think 4 people is a good faction? 6 people? 10, 12? Number wise. I would love to hear from you of what you think is a really good estimate and conversation discussion around factions. So let me list off the factions for New Japan Pro Wrestling. Number 1, Hontai, not hentai, Hontai, Hontai. Number 2, Chaos. Number 3, House of Torture. Even though I know they're part of Bullet Club, but I am separating them because that's what I want to do, and that's what New Japan Pro Wrestling should do. House of Torture is number 3. Number 4, TMDK. Number 5, Bullet Club. Number 6, the new GOD, the Gorillas of Destiny. Number 7, United Empire. Number 8, LIJ. Number 9 is Just 5 Guys. Do not ask me any questions because of the name. And number 10, even though number 10 has been disbanded, was Suzuki-gun. And now the reason why I bring up factions in this podcast episode is because these factions are just there. At one point or another in New Japan history, they were needed. And we can see the Japanese ideology in New Japan Pro Wrestling by having factions. A big ideology in Japanese culture is to do everything by teamwork, even if you're not assigned a certain type of job or task. It is everyone's responsibility to clean up, tidy up, and basically do what they have to do without no question. And most of the time, it's in a team group effort. Over here in America, we hate working in groups. We hate working in teams because somebody is going to take advantage and not do shit and delegate everything, and it's just going to be very, very bad. You could tell I had some pretty bad experiences with that. Anyway, in Japan, their ideology is that everyone works together for the betterment of the goal that they are trying to accomplish. And plus, anyway, it's better working with friends, right? So New Japan Pro Wrestling adopts this. And this is why you see the factions have so many members, and why sometimes the Young Lions end up going into like Hontai and Chaos. It's because it's to teach them the other side of pro wrestling, because the Young Lions come in, they have the grueling dojo system, and then they have these matches and these reps where they only wear the black trunks and they end up doing very simple moves, and their finisher is the Boston Crab. And then eventually they go out to excursion and then come back, they graduate, they're no longer a Young Lion, and then they go into the factions so that way the factions can help them become an all-round New Japan Pro Wrestling wrestler. However, I do think that some factions have run their course. I would definitely disband Hontai. We don't really need them. I would disband Chaos. Supposedly, the leader of Chaos was Okada. What the fuck has Okada ever led? I don't know. But I do think that Chaos should be disbanded. Like, there's no point for Chaos. House of Torture, keep House of Torture. In the last episode, I defended House of Torture. However, break them away from Bullet Club War Dogs because it makes no fucking sense anymore. TMDK, listen guys, I am not really a fan of TMDK. I respect and I love Robbie Eagles because I did interview him. If you guys want to go see that, it's in the Wrestle Tales playlist and the Wrestle Tales interview series where I interview Robbie Eagles, which was really, really cool. So he's the only one that I like and I respect. Kosei Fujita works really well with TMDK, which is kind of weird. And he was another Young Lion, now graduate and doing very well for himself. So some factions do help the Young Lions once they graduate. But overall, I do think that some guys, when they graduate, they shouldn't go into a faction just yet. Bullet Club has a lot of members, whether that's in Japan, in the United States, over in New Zealand, and some fans really want Bullet Club to disband. I still think we need Bullet Club. I'm really enjoying David Finley's Bullet Club War Dogs, but I will say to leave Bullet Club. For the new GOD, I guess. But the new GOD, I wouldn't really call it a faction because it's just Hikuleo and ELP and Jado, and that's about it. United Empire, I love them until Ospreay and Aussie Open left, and now I'm just like, there's no backbone. There's nothing that represents United Empire at this very moment to make them hot like they once was. But individually, I love the members. Then we have LIJ. I think LIJ has definitely run its course, and I think that LIJ needs to disband just for the health of LIJ. And then Just Five Guys, which is Sonata's group. Sonata is making big moves to create his own group and do something different. And I really do like the fact that we have Just Five Guys with those guys in there. However, was the faction needed? It will be kind of weird for certain groups to disband, such as LIJ, Hontai, Chaos. However, they will all land on their feet as singles competitors and tag team wrestlers, and they could just be individual units and not be considered a faction, and then everything could get spread out. And then we could just have the main core factions that actually bring excitement and story and intrigue to the New Japan Pro Wrestling fan base. Ever since the addition of Clark Connors and Dan Maloney into Bullet Club War Dogs and the Madman Gabriel Kidd and Alex Coughlin before he unfortunately had to retire, it's a whole new playground. And I'm excited for it. That's why I wouldn't want Bullet Club to break up, because every iteration of Bullet Club, there is a different level of violence and urgency and just a difference between each and every faction. And you can tell the difference between each and every faction because that personality is so big, is so loud, and the reaction from the fans when Bullet Club is around is fantastic. The same way the reaction that House of Torture gets is fantastic. Again, go listen to the last podcast episode to see what I talk about with House of Torture. United Empire was the same way too, where they had a hot streak going, and a United Empire versus Bullet Club would have been the best thing for New Japan Pro Wrestling, but New Japan Pro Wrestling left a lot of money on the table. Hontai is barely non-existent, so we don't really need Hontai. Chaos, very non-existent, even though I know who's in Chaos. We don't need it. TNDK, it's cool. GOD, that's cool as well. LIJ should disperse, because I think we've seen so much of LIJ, seen so much of these factions, that I'm just like, you guys need to do something new and reinvent yourselves and get that fire back. Just Five Guys can stay because it's brand new, but again, personality, be loud and be different. So for faction-wise for New Japan Pro Wrestling, that's how I would cut down everything. And even if you do disband the groups, there are always other things that the members can do. They could be singles competitors. They can go out to freelance and go over to Noah. They could go over to all the other places and stuff. So it's not going to be lost, and it's not going to be very heartbreaking. Sometimes if you are in a New Japan Pro Wrestling faction, you don't get to shine. And then after years of the group being there and then finally disbanding, you may start to shine, but it may not hold anything, may not be worth anything. People may not care as enough because you were part of a faction that they cared about. But the moment that you want to break out as the superstar, they're not really going to care because they cared more about the team than you. That's why sometimes having factions, the way that New Japan Pro Wrestling has factions, can hurt a wrestler when they disband. Let me quickly talk about the tournament situation. We are currently in Best of the Super Juniors. And in the last 10 years, Best of the Super Juniors has not main evented a New Japan Pro Wrestling pay-per-view such as Dominion. And this time around, according to a poll, and I'm surprised that Kadani, who is the board member of Bushiroad and second in command to Tanahashi, agreed to go along with the poll because by a landslide, the true fans wanted the Best of the Super Juniors finals to main event. They did not want to see Evil versus Jon Moxley, who is not my IWGP champion. So I say this because as we're talking about tournaments, if you don't know, you're new to New Japan Pro Wrestling, the tournaments are the G1, World Tag League, New Japan Cup, Best of the Super Juniors, Super Junior Tag League, and they did do a Super J Cup, but they really don't do that anymore. But that was part of it as well, but they really just don't visit that. So as we're talking about tournaments, I would like to see something where it's not as heavy as these tournaments. Now, I love these tournaments. I cover these tournaments, and they are fun, but they are also exhausting. And us New Japan Pro Wrestling content creators can really attest to how exhausting it is to either wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, depending on what day it is over there in Japan, to watch New Japan Pro Wrestling on the New Japan World app and or website. And it does get exhausting to watch every single match, including the undercard, and make a podcast about it, make a post about it, get people up to date, make people read the article and stuff like that. It does take a toll mentally and physically on us content creators. Now, with that being said, again, I love to do what I love to do, but I think that most of these tournaments should not be round robin, even though that gives us the best kind of wrestling there is. But I think that it should be spread out more, or pick and choose what's going to happen. However, I do feel like if I give an idea, right, because we're just talking, we're brainstorming here. If I give an idea about taking out some of these tournaments or switching up the tournaments to have different rules and different styles, it may hurt the New Japan Pro Wrestling product overall. But again, at the beginning of this episode, I said that wrestling is not meant to be played safe. So that means that sometimes you have to switch up the already content that you have to make it fresh, to make it alive. Because I love the G1. The G1 can stay as the round robin tournament. I like the idea of wrestlers accumulating points. So the G1 can stay the way the G1 is. World Tag League, I think, should be single elimination rather than accumulating points in order to get to the finals. I know they have to stretch this stuff out, but in between stretching it, they can condense it so that way more stories can be implemented, more titles can be focused on, as we were talking about earlier with the championship titles. If you're going to have that many titles, you have to condense your other heavy set tours and include other things and other stories so that way people can turn out and even watch the whole entire show in its entirety. So I think World Tag League should be single elimination. New Japan Cup is already single elimination. I love it. We could keep it. Best of the Super Juniors, thinking about it right now, I'm on the fence about either it should be single elimination or points, or it should be every other year. The rules should change to either or, because that would make it more fresh and kind of interesting. It's just that this year for Best of the Super Juniors is very interesting in who they're going with to be at the finals and how many points are accumulated. And I'm just like, okay, cool. Now, if you're wondering where is my coverage of Best of the Super Juniors for this year, it may be completely late, or I'm just going to skip it because I no longer have a subscription to New Japan World because I didn't have the funds, and I haven't had the funds since, and I am not going to illegally watch it because that's just a choice that I'm going to make. So I either watch it on my own and maybe talk about it from time to time, or we move on to the next tournament, which is the G1. Now, the other tournament is the Super Junior Tag League, and I think that should also be single elimination as well, rather than trying to fit all of these tournaments in a short amount of time span and to have wrestling matches back to back to back in order to pick up points to go to the finals. Some of this should be condensed. And I would like to hear from you guys if you guys think that tournaments like this that are heavy set in round robin style and heavy set in touring should be condensed or should be left alone. And depending on what you choose, I would just love a really thought out good answer as to what you choose. Now that I have went over almost everything, there are little tiny things I still want to throw out there, and maybe New Japan Pro Wrestling can change it up a bit. So as you know, in the last podcast episode, I talked about how there was a one-sided partnership of New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW, and we're seeing it in real time. I would like to present to President Tanahashi, because I believe in Tanahashi. If you want to make faster rising wrestlers, you are gonna have to abandon the idea of being so strict and traditional with the way that the dojo system works, the way that matches are conducted, the way that stories are conducted, the way that people have to do so much for so little and not feel like they're valued. And this has nothing to do with the Japanese yen. This has everything to do with a vision. Because right now, I'm not really talking about money. We're not talking about advertising yet. That's coming in a little bit. But wrestlers want to feel valued. They want to make sure that they are doing everything right and that they're part of a team and they do a job well done, because it is a physical and a mental toll on a wrestler to do all of this and don't really get some type of little bit of respect. And I know that respect goes around and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, you have to believe that they have the potential. They cannot start from the bottom right after they come from excursion or something like that. It feels like when it comes to the Three Musketeers, meaning Tsuji, Umino, and Ren Narita, they still feel held back, even though they are ready to take on more responsibility for New Japan Pro Wrestling. When you crown champions, don't just put it on the older guys because you're worried about the Japanese fans. The Japanese fans are always going to be there because they are loyal. American fans are the one that can give you the extra boost in money and sales and revenue, because if anything happens, we'll be there to talk about it. And then if a complete surprise happens, we'll be there to talk about it. But again, your copyright restrictions have to change as well too, because that's the only reason why they're not gaining such a grand foothold, is because of the copyright restrictions. However, talking about making faster New Japan stars is believing in the younger generation and not just waiting and having them go through these hoops in order to get a championship title when they're a little bit older, when their stock has risen. Like, I still think that if this was going to be the outcome of Jon Moxley being the champion, you should have just gave it to Tsuji. Because what is the point of Jon Moxley being the New Japan Pro Wrestling champion where he's everywhere else but New Japan Pro Wrestling and not even representing New Japan Pro Wrestling where he goes, and not even doing interviews talking about New Japan Pro Wrestling? Like, how do you have a champion that says that he loves New Japan Pro Wrestling and doesn't really show it, and doing everything he can to show it? A champion should be over in the country that they're going to be representing. Also, another thing to address is that while Jon Moxley is not my IWGP champion, he is fighting young guys in this business. So the person that will eventually dethrone Moxley will not get that rub from Jon Moxley. They will not be important enough, because Jon Moxley went after Ren Narita. What the fuck is that going to do? Nothing. He went after Shota Umino, the supposed student of Jon Moxley, which, by the way, if you're going to write in a comment that, oh, the 5-year storyline with Jon Moxley and Shota Umino, no. There has been no 5-year storyline, nothing at all. So stop that. You're only pushing your narrative because that's what you want to see and that's what you created. There might have been something there where Moxley came in, took him under his wing, which he did, but where the fuck has he been for the past 4.5 years? Because that other half is him in New Japan in the G1 and then lost in the G1. So, yeah. Anyway, my point is that if the younger guys in New Japan Pro Wrestling keep taking losses after losses after losses, when sometimes they need that win, they need that momentum, it's going to not feel right when they get a championship title, because no one is really going to care. You're going to have someone like Moxley defeat Ren Narita. What the fuck is Ren Narita going to do now? You're going to have Jon Moxley defeat someone like Shota Umino. What is that going to do? It's not going to help Shota. At least he left the jacket at the ringside and was like, I'm not going to do the jacket thing anymore, which I'm happy about. The idea is that sometimes having younger wrestlers face the older wrestlers, the veterans, doesn't always work out, especially when nobody's elevated. The only time this works is if New Japan Pro Wrestling borrowed either Cody Rhodes, Randy Orton, Kevin Owens, because those guys know how to elevate the young stars. They know how to put together a match where they elevate the young stars. Shingo Takagi can elevate the younger stars because Shingo Takagi knows how to do it. There are other wrestlers that know how to elevate these young guys. But it's all about having a vision, having a story. If I tell you about Yota Tsuji, Yota Tsuji is an amazing athlete. He has an amazing look to him. He has the best curb stomp in the business. However, I cannot explain to you what Gene Blast is supposed to mean. However, he does do an American style football spear because he played American football in Japan. Because in Japan, in the college that he went to, they have American football. I'm still confused by hearing that. So yeah, there's American football being taught in Japan. So Tsuji goes and does the spear, and then I guess that's how he became Gene Blast, or he found Gene Blast over in Mexico. But it doesn't get explored enough, but I can tell you that he's a badass. He has that big creepy grin that you don't know if he's going to be your friend 1 minute and then turn on you the next. Tsuji is very confident in the ring, outside the ring, when he shit talks, doing promos. The only thing is that him being an LIJ, to me personally, still doesn't fit at all. Because when he aligned himself with LIJ, I was like, yo, he's going to take out Naito and he's going to assume leadership role of LIJ. There was a quick thought and second that Sonata was no longer going to be champion because Tsuji had challenged Sonata and almost took it from him. Everybody, including the Japanese fans at that event, was like gasping and at the edge of their seat. I was the same way. Imagine if Tsuji would have dethroned Sonata at that time. It would be the equivalent of how well they pushed Jay White to become champion in New Japan Pro Wrestling not too long after his excursion. And that is what Tanahashi needs to do for his young lions to become the best wrestlers they are. Sure, they could go on excursion. Excursion can't help because New Japan Pro Wrestling lacks in different styles and different types of wrestling techniques to help these young guys become an all-around athlete. So you send them out to places where you have partners and they can learn different styles. Tsuji decided to go to Mexico. At the time, Jay White was here in America and did Ring of Honor for a bit, but then he came back and he became a made star in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And other people had went to Rev Pro and so forth and so forth. And that is what Tanahashi has to do, is look into the past of what made these wrestlers and why people fell in love with them. And then also doing risky fucking decisions for certain wrestlers. And if it fails, it fails. You know that it failed, but you can maybe catch it before it fails 100% and sort of change the direction. That's why they had to have more people on hand to look at it from the outside in. Because when you're in, you could get tunnel vision. And when I say in, I mean like in the business 24/7. You're touring with the guys. You're setting up the ring. You're doing commentary. You're doing all this kind of stuff. Like you're in there hands on. For someone that is outside, that can see the bigger picture and see the puzzles and try to put it together, that is someone that you need. You need someone like that has the passion and the drive to be like, are you sure you want to go down that route? How about X, Y, and Z and all these ideas that I have and what works, what doesn't work, and put them all in a notebook and write them all down, and eventually we will visit them back and try to unravel them and have these wrestlers become the best versions of themselves. Also, New Japan Pro Wrestling needs to invest in advertising because it's not enough for me and my reach to tell people about New Japan Pro Wrestling. And I will talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling all day, every day. It is on me. It's in my heart. Like, I fucking love New Japan Pro Wrestling. But until they advertise and invest in the advertising, whether that's like on YouTube, and cut down their really strict copyright laws, because I'm telling you, man, people illegally steal no matter what. But if you can cut down and allow us to talk about it and post things and assign certain people who wear New Japan Pro Wrestling on their skin and true and proud and don't do it for fucking clout, give them permission to talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling, break down New Japan Pro Wrestling, keep everybody up to date, then you guys would prosper, because you are investing in certain content creators and not just influencers and content creators that say they love New Japan Pro Wrestling but haven't said shit about the one-sided partnership, but yet then are currently on Twitter arguing about the subscriptions for New Japan World to be down and the New Japan World app to be shit. If all you're gonna do is say that this is gonna be shit without any type of ideas or how to improve something, you're not helping the cause. Just saying that right now. But yes, New Japan Pro Wrestling needs to invest in advertising and putting it everywhere, talking about it everywhere, hitting up people to do interviews, and even doing writing and articles and stuff like that. Like, you have to invest in your business. New Japan Pro Wrestling has been around forever. I've said this a little bit earlier, but now that they are attached to AEW, they also have to do advertising as well, so that way people know that these are two different things. We have our own show over here. Come visit us over here. If AEW is not going to put in that fucking work, then you have to do it too. If AEW is not going to be like, you know, your streamer friends where they end up hosting and/or rating somebody and they're like, hey, this guy is good people. I want my fans to connect with your fans, and go over there and show them some love. And some of them stay, some of them don't. But New Japan Pro Wrestling has to think of this like a streamer gig. I can't believe I just used that in this podcast episode. Woe is going to stay. And I am going to end with that, because I don't like making podcast episodes that are like 2 hours long, because I'm going to repeat myself. And I hope that I did the job that I was supposed to do with this podcast episode of laying everything out, what New Japan has going for it, and what to do, what to change, how to improve. I know none of this is going to be done overnight. I'm not expecting it to be done overnight, but if we have a conversation about it now, just imagine in a couple months if things do start to change and people do start to see what's really happening in real time and start to make the decisions now to not play it safe. Because playing it safe is attaching yourself, New Japan Pro Wrestling, to AEW, where AEW is not doing as well as it should. And they're only attaching to you to try and do well and to use you as a springboard. There's a reason why TNA and AEW no longer have this partnership together. It was not beneficial. And to know that the president of New Japan Pro Wrestling, Tanahashi, is sort of jealous of WWE and how fast they create wrestlers tells you a lot. And a lot needs to change. And of course, it's not going to happen overnight. It might happen over a course of 3 months, 6 months, a year, who knows? But today they can start making changes. Today they can look at everything and be like, okay, we need this, we don't need that. Because if something works, you keep it. If something is decent, you improve it. If something is completely not working, just throw it away. Don't even want to bring it back, because it could look good on paper, but the moment that you try it out, you're going to be like, oh, it's shit. So throw it away. So I am going to end this on that New Japan Pro Wrestling, when it comes to advertising, you have to think like a streamer and get the rub that way, if that makes sense. Because if I keep talking, I'm going to go around in circles. But I really do appreciate everyone listening this far into the podcast episode. All I want to do is just help the industry. That's all I want to do, is help the industry become valuable and become a consultant for New Japan Pro Wrestling, for any other company out there. Even help wrestlers during the tape study series, where I sit down, watch a match, break it down for you, and tell you things outside the box and tell you what to improve and ask questions and try to get you to be the best professional wrestler that you can be without having any type of loopholes or fluff or anything of the nature that can distract you from being the best that you can be. But yeah, all I care about is making sure that fans appreciate professional wrestling a little bit more with all of my work that I have done. And all of my work is on youtube.com/Square Circle Podcast. All of my work is on Spotify. Search Square Circle Podcast. All of my work is on Substack, marieshadows.substack.com. I would love to see you guys there. And for anywhere else you want to support me at, it will be at the description box below. Just click that link for all my links and you get to support me every which way. But I am so excited to have you here with me on this journey. Thank you so much for listening this far. Thank you so much for supporting me. And I'll see you guys in the comments on youtube.com/Square Circle Podcast. And I'll see you all in the next one.